In the early 1920s, Herbert Hoover's foreign policy focused solely on isolationism. However, after World War I, FDR changed the policy dramatically from disengagement to neutrality and eventually led to total involvement.
Hot beat, fire in the middle. Hot beat, poor man's griddle. Hot beat, sizzling soup. Oh, what will I do?
One of the first dips into the sea was the Stimson Doctrine. It was America's first response to Japan's violation of the open door policy. This reaction pissed off the American isolationists in Japan, leading to the passage of the Neutrality Acts.
The Nine in the America First Committee also came out of the Neutrality Act because it advocated no U.S. involvement in wars. They thought that World War I was a terrible mistake. Therefore, believing all other involvement in wars will also be a mistake.
America waded deeper into the water after FDR delivered the Four Freedoms speech. It centered on democracy as well as people having freedoms of speech, religion, from want, and from fear.
In addition to this, the Good Neighbor policy also secured democracy. This also ensured respect for the other nations in the Western Hemisphere. And they helped each other out, bro. You know? Further dipping. Basically, FDR knew that the US would soon enter the war. Top secret meetings, the cool part, with Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister. It took place on a ship in the middle of the lonely, dark Atlantic. There they drew up the charter that established principles for peace after the war. This was what formed the alliance.
The relationship between the U.S. and Japan became increasingly strained. This was due to Japan's violation of the open door policy, leading to the Stimson Doctrine and the embargo on the U.S. oil. Japan retaliated due to the reaction of the U.S. by bombing Pearl Harbor.
After the attack on Pearl Harbor, America ended their isolation policies and decided to get involved in the war. Americans developed a great sense of nationalism and patriotism on the home front, uniting their anger against Japan. This changed the foreign policy view, especially for the isolationists. They felt the anger as if they were getting attacked in their own homes. This increased war effort in the amount of people who enlisted for the battle.
For now they're on a solid track since D-Day, 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 D-Day. It'll take more than a...
However, the Japanese were discriminated against because they were all associated with being responsible for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The court case Komatsu versus U.S. supported Japanese internment camps, which allowed the racism to grow.
In effect of Japan's unwillingness to surrender, America opted to immediately end the war by the Manhattan Project, rather than to suffice to 3 more years of violence.
You see, Japan just refused to surrender. They fought differently than other countries, which is something that America is just not used to. They didn't play by the rules. They'd rather die than surrender. This was especially proved after America had to drop more than 1 bomb on Japan. This is really controversial because, it risked the lives of tens of thousands of Japanese civilians. However, from a soldier's point of view, they would rather use the bomb than continue 3 more long years of war.
The entry of the U.S. into World War II stimulated wartime production. Business far exceeded their production from previous years.
Business was booming. People were getting jobs, homes, and food. Shit was crazy. American factories, they were just producing and producing. It was,
The influx of war material production caused the U.S. to create the War Production Board to regulate and manage the war industries. This initially developed out of World War I and was so successful, it carried on to World War II.
To increase the war effort, especially women, Rosie the Riveter greatly influenced people to support the war. Rosie the Riveter displayed women in a more masculine and tough manner, outside their household role. However, the make-up worn was to ensure men that went overseas that they would have a job to come back to. Japanese and women were not the only groups that were degraded in society. African Americans were as well. White resentment and prejudices caused African Americans to adopt the Double V slogan.
Civil rights leaders supported this. African Americans adopted the slogan, for both V's meant victory, but one for overseas and the other on the home front.
Although these were all domestic issues, FDR and Truman dealt with the foreign problems by conversing with two other leaders, Stalin and Churchill. The Big Three agreed on a strategy at the Tehran Conference. They met again at the Yalta Conference and agreed on how to handle the aftermath of the war. Unfortunately, Roosevelt died, and his successor, Truman, attended the conference in Potsdam and demanded the Japanese surrender.